So the sociology of religion is an interesting topic and can get people pretty excited about either in a positive or negative way talking about it. But it's part of all the cultures around the world. There are some big questions to look at, like what is a religion? How is it organized? Think of religion as an organization or an institution. How do people choose their religions? What's in most cases pretty obvious. Why are women and older people more religious than men and younger people? Why do people kill each other in the name of their religion? Some of these are very difficult questions to answer. And what is the future of religion? So, what is religion and how is it organized is a complicated question. The key beliefs among today's youth include some research that was done by Smith called the moralistic therapeutic deism, which is, they talk about in the textbook, God exists who created and ordered the world and watches over human life. It's a fairly traditional view of it. God wants people to be good to each other, as taught in the Bible and by most religions, including non-Christian religions. And the central goal of life is to be happy and feel good about oneself. God doesn't need to be particularly involved in one's life except when God is needed to solve a problem. Like they say, there's no atheist in a foxhole. And good people go to heaven when they die. Most people can accept that and understand that. Sociological understanding of religion is a bit different. Comte talked extensively about the religion of humanity. Max Weber talked about the aesthetics forms of 19th century Protestantism, like Lutheranism or the Reformation, in the development of capitalism. Remember in the one chapter in the readings where we talked about the Protestant work ethic. And Emil Durkheim taught God basically represented a community or a society. The It includes some definitions like sacredness. That was one of Durkheim's focuses. Um, the Religion by D. Marat, this is in the book. There are symbolic boundaries between people, objects, time, places, and things, and world events. And of course, there's the supernatural, which was talked about by Stark and Fink. The general explanation of existence is part of the supernatural. Mysteries, if you will. Religion tends to be fluid. It's defined by behaviors, beliefs, and commitments of people or groups or society. And we know from the last 3 months that groups in society change over time, resulting in fluidity. I grew up in the Roman Catholic Church, and when I was a child going to church or to Mass, the altar, for example, was turned around from the way it is today. So even state religions like Catholicism have an opportunity to change and be fluid. Doctrine is only part of a working religion. That is the dogma that people talk about in terms of religious values. The major religions of the world include Christianity, which most people in North America are, Islam, which has pockets in the Middle East and the Philippines and other areas of the world, Hinduism, which is in South Asia, Chinese syncretism, non-religion, that would be people that are atheists or agnostics. And there are 25 others, including these listed in Table 14.1. Religion is a social institution. What is the function of religious social institution? Well, to promote social order. You'll notice that these, by the way, mirror or imitate what we talked about with social institutions earlier in the semester. There's a central mechanism for social control over the behavior of people that are part of the religion. like the Ten Commandments, for example. What do uh, denominations and congregations play, what roles they play in organizing religious activity? Well, denominations are organized religious groups with at least a few distinguished religious doctrines. So some monks, for example, as a denomination don't talk. Some religious groups like Mormons practice their religion by witnessing. And so that's an important religious doctrine in their faith. Frequent provide correct doctrine and model liturgies. That's one of the things they do, like witnessing. Congregations, on the other hand, are specific church or temples or mosques that people actually go to. So you can be a member of a local congregation, which is part of a bigger denomination. Most important level of organization is the grassroots congregation. Large and small and everything in between. In the United States, about 335,000 religious congregations, a lot. About 300,000 Protestant and kindred churches, and 22,000 Catholic and Orthodox churches. About 1,200 non-Christian religious or congregations, and congregation sizes from under 100 to over 2,000, which are called mega churches. So we have several around the Chicago metropolitan area. Question 2, how do people choose their religion? Well, the pattern of religious choice um, is a complicated one. You might ask the question, what leads to segregation in American churches? Sunday is the most segregated day of the week, and church is the most segregated place in the country. Church segregations relate to religion and residence and social status. So, for example, if you lived in the North Shore of Chicago in a very affluent area, the religion would be Presbyterian or Congregational, Episcopalian. If you live in a more middle class area, it might be Catholic or Lutheran. If you live in a more impoverished area, it might be Southern Baptist or some other Protestant denomination. So it is related to residence, social status, and of course income. The pattern of religious choice include the ethnic church. Immigrants establish their own churches based on their culture and ethnicity. For example, the Black Church, the most important segregated church in the United States, including Southern Baptist. They're very religiously conservative, but liberal in their theology. They teach a liberation theology. And of course, they're critical to the civil rights movement. The leader of the civil rights movement in the United States was Martin Luther King Jr., and he taught regularly and preached regularly at Southern Baptist churches. There is a fall in ethnic churches because of the mixing of ethnic groups into the culture. It's related to the decline in immigration over the 4 or more generations. People just don't go to the same churches. And there's also residential segregation, contributed to the homogeneity of congregations. So people in one neighborhood tend to go to the churches in their neighborhood. Social class and religious preference are also connected. Marx, of course, religion is the opiate of the people. By the way, it's a typo. It's 1894, not 1984. Religion is linked to inequality and human suffering and should be appeal most to poorest members of society. That's their opiate in Marxist thinking. Norris and Engelhardt, society that provides less personal security, physical and financial, is more likely to lead people to find security in religion and prayer. Well, that is a cause and effect relationship that makes sense. Poor, more likely to be religious and rely on religious institutions. Social class and religious preference are connected. Caste and religious switching in India is an example. Among Hindus, the caste system provides relatively rigid and religiously sustained ordering of people into the social hierarchy. um, don't really have a caste system in this country based on religion. It's based more on skin color or race. So it's called a racial caste system. Brahmanism, of course, is people at the top of this religious caste. Um, and it can even be a theocracy where the government is run and influenced by the religious groups. Gives an example of denomination and social class in the United States. It's really difficult to see on the screen, but you can check your textbook and look at it. Different denominations in the United States contain surprisingly different kinds of people. And these may be based on a number of reasons, including occupation, income, and residence. Social class and religious preferences also addresses who converts to what denomination or religion and why they do that. Among Christians, most conversions are between denominations. So a person might go from being a Lutheran to being a Methodist, or being a Methodist and becoming Catholic. Higher comfort level in retaining religious commitments within the dual faith or dual denomination marriages. So people that are religious together tend to stay together. New religious movements are offshoots of foreign relations, sometimes migrating many miles from many continents to reestablish footholds in new areas. They're attractive to people with some privilege and also to irreligious people who, of course, are looking for some meaningful connection in their life. Why are women and old people more religious than men and women? Um, the answer is women are more likely to take up new religions because they're treated badly by old religions. So, for example, um, in the Roman Catholic Church, women are not allowed to be priests. They can be subservient to be nuns. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but it's not unlikely for, for women to migrate to religions like the Lutheran Church, who sees women as having parity with men. Across societies, women are still treated differentially. Religion and motherhood are likely bases of self-validation available to most traditional women, including those in the developed world. For example, if you listen to many Christian marital vows, the woman is expected to be subservient to her husband. Most sociologists agree that the most important reason older people tend to be more religious is what they, not aging, but what's called cohort differences. That is, groups of people in the same age bracket. Why do people kill each other in the name of religion? Well, this is a million-dollar question. Religious conflict is difficult to distinguish from ethnic or class conflict. So ethnic and class groups can have conflict, but they also have similar religious beliefs. History is replete with religious wars, including the Crusades. Many religious wars have ethnic or tribal conflict more central to the problem. Hindus and Muslims conflict in India is a good example. And of course, question 5, what is the future of religion? Well, it's looking dim. Secularization versus increased religiosity is the issue. Starks and colleagues talk about it and posits that growth and strength of religion is in highly developed countries, and theorize that deep-seated human needs for religious commitment and patience are at the center of all this. How do you define secularization? Well, Max Weber, focused on the authority of religion over the lives of people, not the abandonment of God. So secularizing means that it becomes more in the public sphere instead of the religious sphere. Europeans tend to be irreligious. Religion is kept private. There's less immigration in and out of Europe. Well, that's not true lately, but it has been. And there's greater safety nets for the poor. So Sweden is a great example of that. Up until the time that refugees from Iraq were starting to leave Iraq in the 1990s, it had very low immigration rates. Sweden also takes great pains to take care of their children and their elderly. It's cradle to grave care. Um, and people generally don't speak of their religion. There are churches and cathedrals, but people generally don't use them. American exceptionalism is an interesting concept. It's a high level of conventional religiosity. So people go to church. I'm not so sure that they're going to church necessarily means that they're more uh, faithful or religious. There was a rising conservative Protestantism over the last several decades, and because of that, there's high fertility rates, and they tend to retain young people in the religion, which is also a reaction to what was going on in the 1960s. This chart just shows the decline in religion in America over the last 40 years. The evangelical Protestantism is in the orange, it's rising and then dropping off. And religious preference is started rising in the 1990s and spiked in the early 2000s. The fastest growing religion in the United States is no religious preference. And they get that from surveys. Young people no longer want to be associated with right-wing politics and now characterize religious denominations, so they become unknowns. Everywhere in the world, as in the United States, religious people have more children than irreligious people. Orthodox Church's uh, most trusted institution is the most trusted institution in Russia. Of course, it's difficult in Russia to trust the government. The persecution of religious organizations is a real issue, especially um, in different parts of Asia, and it, as of late, has decreased in China. Religion and the promise of prosperity is really maybe at the key of all this. Um, Prosperity becomes the goal of being religious. The life hereafter is better than this one. Prayer and good works are the price of being prosperous. Um, and of course, the grace comes from those who donate to the church of a prosperity preacher.